Welcome everyone to the continuing series. So Jon Taylor has been talking about maturity in a relationship, and this is a continuation for those of you maybe perhaps watching this recording. Go back; he's done several in the series, so go back and watch the rest. They will all be good on their own, but it will make even more sense. So please share. I know you've got some information about a conference too, so please share.
Yeah. So I couldn't remember if today is part 3 or 4 in the series, but today's topic definitely builds on what's come before. So if you haven't seen the last few, go back and watch because I'll be referencing those. And then let me see, share my screen really quick. So I will be presenting at a conference. That's not the one I wanted. Oops, bear with me. Sorry. I will be presenting at a conference in March. This is the first time this conference has happened. It's called the Human Intimacy Conference. It's headed by Dr. Kevin Skinner. Some of you may know him through Addo, Bloom for Women. So he's gathering different experts and presenters in sex and intimacy, particularly healing from betrayal. So Michelle Mays is going to be presenting, Kevin Skinner is going to be presenting. There's a whole list here. If you want to snap on your phone real quick, just this QR code, there's a nice registration link. There's several sessions for each hour, and part of registration is access afterward to all the recordings. So if you're looking for a boost, if you want to learn a little bit more about relationships and intimacy and recovery, this will be a good opportunity. I'm excited to be taking part of this. I'll be presenting on secure functioning in early recovery. So plug there. Today, our topic, I'm going to look at social learning theory, which is less of it's not a stage-based developmental model. It's more of this is how human beings learn how to be human beings. And so, like I said, I'll be referencing some previous stuff that we've gone over. But the big idea in social learning is this builds on what B.F. Skinner studied in the 40s and 50s, operant conditioning. This is the rats that press the bar for dopamine hits or food or whatever. So Alfred Bandura is the main author of this theory, the original author of this theory. And he adds to operant conditioning, he adds basically what I think makes a lot of intuitive sense. We watch the people around us. We evaluate whether what they show us is helpful to us or not. We practice what we've seen. And if what we've seen and what we do is beneficial to us, we are likely to repeat it. So that's the basis of social learning theory. We observe, model, imitate behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of the people around us. Bandura would say there's critical periods. He would say folks are more plastic to this when they're younger. Those of you in recovery who maybe even struggled in your first and second recoveries and then found a good recovery community, surrounded yourself with people that you want to grow up to be, can definitely attest that this is not limited to childhood or earlier years. The pop psychology idea is you become the sum of the people you surround yourselves with. There is something to that. There is something to that. So here's how it applies to relationships. 100% of couples that I work with, and I think 100% of couples in the world, they start with, in their own marriages, own relationships, they start with what they saw mom and dad do that they felt was useful, or that they felt was effective. Now, the door is open for all sorts of problems when we say effective, because if we're thinking if what was modeled to us was this win-lose, zero-sum type relationship, then we learn from parents how to win and how to avoid losing. If you had parents where maybe the dynamic was abusive and someone was big and scary and threatening, You may have learned how to be big, scary, and threatening, and or how to stay under the radar and not trouble the waters. Um, so we basically hold on to, we learn from and reproduce what is modeled that is useful, that we see leads to survival. And as we've talked, like in um, I think the previous webinar on moral development, I talked about the higher the stress level, the more primitive we're going to be working in our brains. So the most primitive imperative is just survive at all costs. We're not looking at comfort. We're not looking at fairness. We're looking at like, just how do I survive? So in this model, attention is key. You can have all sorts of things going on around you, but if they don't merit your attention, you won't encode. Um, so the way that I see this affect relationships is what captures our interest, what captures our attention is what we're going to learn from. So if you come from a family where positive connection, positive bids are not rewarded, the more extreme behaviors are what become salient. So in many ways, this was the house that I grew up in. The little kindnesses, the considerations, they happened, but they were not the news of the day. The yelling, screaming competition was the news of the day. So guess who came to his marriage with an insensitivity towards others around him model? That was me. If there's a big problem, we'll hash things out. Otherwise, we essentially ignore each other. Then there's retention. So after attention, there's retention, recall, and storage. This has to do with saliency and meaning. So not just what somebody tells you the meaning is, but the meaning that you encode and becomes important for you. So again, if you had an abusive parent who would get big and scary, and you watched your other parent bob and weave, become really quiet, really docile, really avoidant, you don't need either parent to sit you down and say, this is how you should be. According to your temperament, according to your birth order, your place in the family, you will identify with what is salient, what feels accessible to you. So if abusive parent is big and scary to you too, I get small. And then maybe at a certain age, you hear this almost as a trope, the teenager who confronts the parent and dominates them, finally, that moment where he never touched me again. He never got in my face again because I leveled him. So the retention means that we don't immediately emulate what we see in relationships. You may have templates that lie dormant. You may have templates for relationships that don't get used until there's a need for it. I see this all the time, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on how it relates to maturity. But I remember growing up and cataloging. My parents did this thing. It feels awful. I will never do it. Well, when you become the parent of what feels like too many kids, guess what you start doing? And all of a sudden, like, oh, it's not that mom and dad were right, but it's like, oh, this makes sense. And I see a lot of them in me. Um, so just because you skated through a certain phase of your life without reproducing what you saw doesn't mean that it's not in you. So that's the retention part. Our brain is always working in the background. Our brains are less inclined to figure out each situation uniquely and more to pull like a template from the past. Then there's reproduction. You must have an opportunity to repeat. So where I think this is salient for couples, inordinate amounts of stress, dysregulation in the system, even power differentials. So this is where I see a lot of enactment or projection going on. Maybe I did grow up with one of those emotionally abusive parents, and I locked it away inside of me. I will never, ever do this. Maybe I picked a partner who's a little more docile, a little more passive, and I may find that those dominant templates come out of me because there's opportunity. Again, without thinking about it, without being aware and being conscious, that which is subconsciously encoded in us tends to be what we present. And then there's motivation and reinforcement, which is what Bandura would say is the last phase. Um, I think the way that the models I read were written, I think they gave too much credit to only be motivated by good, positive things. Um, like 100% of the time with couples that I work with, the struggle that they're having is they are sacrificing doing better long term for feeling better now. So that's where I see the motivational reinforcement for unhealthy templates. Most unhealthy templates provide some kind of immediate relief and are completely non-functional for a long-term relationship. So um, in high stress situations, we don't look down the road. We don't think complexly. We don't think with complexity. So to hook your wagon to the right motivation requires some stopping, some pausing, some questioning. Hey, why do we keep doing this? It's not working. For example, I had a couple in my office earlier this week, and about the fourth time I heard from the coupleship, they were each taking turns saying this. I told you about that. Why are you acting surprised? I paused them and I said, both of you, I want you to tell me what you mean by I told you. And they're like, well, we had a conversation. I explained it. And I said, well, now I've heard from both of you combined 4 times now that I told you, and your partner is acting as if it was never said. So maybe this telling your partner, however you're doing it, doesn't work. Maybe it's not getting you what you want. I would encourage you to think about a different way to communicate, because I'm getting sick of hearing that complaint. I'm getting sick of hearing that justification. I get to be mad because I told you, you should know. Clearly, it's not working. So it's reframes like that, where we're not just looking for what gets things off my chest, but what actually moves this relationship forward, what helps us function more securely. That's where we have to look, to have the proper motivation. So I've essentially just been picking these models out of a hat. Most of these are models that I studied in my undergrad and graduate school, and I've had in the back of my mind as I'm refreshing my memory. I've had these in the back of my mind as I work with clients, but I don't work from these models. These are more like the DNA that a lot of psychology and therapy comes from. So I was reading this model and I was like, well, this says nothing about maturity. This is just how learning happens. Again, it's very intuitive. Um, and then I thought about why we keep doing models that don't work. If there's a whole conditioning part of this, if there's a motivation reinforcement part of this, then according to this theory, we shouldn't continue doing things that are self-defeating. I thought, oh, there's the maturity. There's the maturity. This is about awareness. This is about complexity of thinking. Again, it's easy, and I think 100% of us at least start our long-term relationships with a model that is really close to the one that we grew up seeing. Because in your early relationships, you don't have anything else to go off of. There's no other data. That is the template that's inside of you. Maturity, then I think, according to this model, where this model teaches about maturity, that a maturity is differentiation. There may be a long-standing tradition. There may be, this is the only way I saw it happen. If I'm really tuned into myself, how this makes me feel, am I putting good energy after bad results? Or if I'm looking at my partner, how's this working for you? Differentiation would have me less allied to these models and patterns that I've had my whole life, and more allied to looking at the present moment and down the road. Hey, what would work for us? What actually creates the bond that we want in our relationship? What actually gets me the relationship I would like with my children? I desperately want my partner to understand what I'm feeling. And, I've just spent 5 months screaming it in their face every night. They're not getting it. Differentiation would say, I should try something else, because I'm not getting this. So I think this model shows that in maturity, there is flexibility. There's room for adaptation. In fact, I'd say there's an imperative for adaptation. Adaptation is not what we're looking for when our back is against the wall. Adaptation is what we have in the front of our mind. I'm not expecting any of this to just work just because I think it should. I really have to test, retest, try, fail. And ultimately, if you're in a secure functioning relationship together, we are evaluating, we're trying things out. Um, we are making room for trial and error. Again, not with that entitlement that, I know best, my family did it right, or, I can see clearly. It's everything is an experience. So even when I have a lot of people who come to marriage therapy who legitimately have done better than their parents, and they may have omitted the grossest, most extreme behaviors from their parents, but the template, the setup is still the same. So while they may stop themselves from doing the ultra destructive thing, they don't have a template that allows for a lot of health, flexibility, growth, collaboration. So maturity is being committed to what actually works for both. Nothing remains automatic. We question everything. Not to be antagonistic, but to ensure that we have the best model working between the two of us. Um, that requires finding new models. So that's where I mentioned before, like in 12 steps. One of the questions that Stan Tatkin asks every couple on intake is, who are your coupleship friends, and how many of those relationships are happy and worth emulating? And I think that's really, really important, to have relationships around you that you feel are worth emulating, because we always learn socially. This is always running in the background. So that's not a, when Stan talks about that, that's not a like, hey, do this if you're really in trouble. It's no, this is part of maintenance. Have good models around you, read good books, get good ideas. So maturity is, there's some humility to it. When you can say, either relationally or individually, hey, I'm not equipped for the kind of life that I would like to be living, or I'm not equipped for the kind of security and safety that I'd be having. I need to learn some things. I need to train. I can't take it for granted that this will come automatically. So sponsors, mentors, learning from those who are around you, who have been where you've been and are not miserable anymore, is really important. And again, I think that humility is a big part of maturity. I'm still learning. I'm forever a student. I could always improve. I think it's a really insecure, immature stance to hunker down in your ideology, hunker down in your behavior. I have everything that I need. I'm just looking for somebody who can hang with me. That's really one person. Um, so in closing, I would say what this model shows us is maturity is recognizing that we're susceptible to the influences around us. And if we want to do well, we have to engineer an environment that makes doing well, learning, being creative, being flexible. We have to engineer an environment around us that makes that easier. So that is social learning theory and maturity.
That's really great. I was thinking, even with the recognizing that we are influenced by our environment, in 12 step, we talk about hang with the winners, and that kind of is that same theory as if you go to 12 step meetings where everybody's, acting out, relapsing all the time, then that's not, that's probably what you're going to continue to do as well. I was wondering,
Even
go
that
ahead.
group of people who's chronically relapsing is enjoyable to be around.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a matter of I enjoy this, it's what's the momentum of this relationship? Where is it headed? Do we have serious sobriety, or are we all kind of treading water? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's all good. But like, it kind of goes to one of my questions with is, how do you create the willing, like, okay, go back to the couple that you were talking about. I'm tired of hearing you guys talk about the same thing. Is there a different way to do it? How do you create the willingness rather than going like, no, I want to win, especially if what was modeled to you was dominance and winning,
Yeah.
is there, I guess if they're coming to you, there's at least a hope for it.
From the therapist perspective, how I create that motivation to do something different is, I don't move the brick walls out of their way. I let them run into it over and over again. And even sometimes I will exaggerate the brick wall. Why don't you try that again, but this time talk slower and watch your partner and they can see real time, or I'll play back video. I want you two to watch. So unfortunately, and I've said this a lot before, when push comes to shove, the greatest motivator is pain. So you cultivate that willingness by, again, it's partially being in touch with reality, and it's partially like, hey, I've got to admit my own best thinking got me here. So there's humility you have to start adopting, and nothing humbles like pain and consequence. So this is where I also think in couples it's dangerous to protect each other from the truth. I don't want to tell you this because you'll be upset, or I don't want to admit this because it's a really crappy thing that I just did or said or thought. But if we don't allow for pain and discomfort in our relationships, there is never a need to adapt. So this is why for couples in recovery, not just from building safety, but from like being able to feel the heat of the fire that you're living in, and be able to move away from it. You have to tell each other the truth about everything, or there's no impetus for change.
I always think of if I'm not willing to, because I'm gonna protect you from like you're gonna be so hurt by this. I always feel like that's just I don't want to have to deal with it, the unpleasant. So I always feel like that one is self-serving. Um, so if you pick a partner, and I know this is kind of a dicey question, but because you said like the template is in there and I may not need it or use it until it gets to be a certain place, but like with these patterns being replicated, like is there a case for like if I have that big scary template inside me, I'm going to probably be looking for a partner even subconsciously, that will be the counter to that.
I think there's something to it. There's, my read on that theory is we often go for familiarity,
Mm,
even if familiar is not good for us.
right.
Because there's some level of competency that we feel, I know how to handle this stuff. And then there's also the idea of projection. This is something that in our enmeshment work, we work on a lot with the spouses of enmeshment and women. Um, you may not want anything to do with being this person's mother, or being angry and resentful. But this is the truth about human relationships. If somebody is walking around looking for an oppressor or a bad guy, there's this, I don't know, it's almost like this gravitational well. There's this pull towards those kind of behaviors. We call that enactment, or projection. Um, so the templates that are inside of me that are unconscious, I am constantly doing casting calls. I'm constantly setting people up. I'm constantly responding in a way that evokes those responses that are familiar to me. So there's lots of paths. I see it recreated all the time. This is why when I work with couples, I spend quite a bit of time in the intake. What did you learn about relationships from your parents? What did your parents' relationship look like to you? Um, because I need to have it on my radar for when that starts coming up. When I see those reenactments, because that's a sign that the subconscious is more driving the boat than intentionality and purpose.
So, like, would a big and scary be less likely to partner with a big and scary because it like that template would work, or is that too much of a stretch?
It depends. I had one couple that referred to themselves as red red,
Oh,
and they were very much like it was like watching the Hulk fight himself, just
oh,
pounding each other into submission and never ending. So it's not like the exact template we came from is what is going to get reproduced. It's if this behavior continues to be rewarded, it continues
oh,
to be
okay.
advantageous. If nobody is stopping and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this really sucks," which with this couple, by the way, I was saying every week, and finally they turned to me and they said, "This isn't the part that bothers us. We're fine with this." I was like, "All right, well, bless you in your pursuits."
Don't hurt each other.
Right.
Okay, and then uh Yeah, okay. I think we've got a question. Oh, the Stan Tatkin, I love that part of his intake is, that who are you hanging with? And, like as you're thinking about your friend couples, is that something that you find healthy and would want to emulate, from that? Because, like, we talked about 12 step and mentoring and stuff like that, but to think about as a coupleship, having couple friends, that can support you. And I think that's all part of having a supportive network too. It's not just what are they modeling for you and what are you modeling for them, but it's like how can we raise the bar for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there's different thresholds for safety with different levels of functioning. And, I've heard from a lot of couples that I work with that the people that they hung with in early recovery aren't the people that they continue feeling like I can hang with, especially if there's some hard situations where things aren't really moving. And it's kind of the same story over and over again. I've heard from people say, I love these people dearly, but like I gotta get some new people that I'm talking to because I keep feeling the burden of that. I keep having, my own stuff from early on where I'm not anymore. I keep having that reactivated. Um, so yeah, I would call it relationship hygiene, social hygiene, I think is really, really important for couples.
Well, it's to your point too. It's like I know there are people that go into program and get a sponsor and they have them forever, and like that wasn't my experience. And yes, in each chapter, each season, like I needed different mentors, different
Yeah.
support, and but being open to looking for that, not just going, yeah, I've had that sponsor for 20 years and they're great, they can be a friend, whatever. But when I'm looking to fill a void in me or to deal with something that's a problem, I want somebody to help me that knows about that. So speaking of that, we've got some a mother enmeshment question. So we're going to ask you, what advice would you have for a wife dealing with betrayal trauma due to porn relapse from an SA husband who is also mother enmeshed and resistant to group recovery or mother enmeshment? Maintenance. It has been 6 months since recent discovery. Still waiting for a full disclosure while doing marital sessions. Is it safe to continue marital sessions when there is no recovery plan or willingness to create emotional safety or transparency? What can she do to support him, but also protect herself from unnecessary suffering?
Um, this is a really, really great question, and it falls in line with what we're talking about here. I can only speak to CSAT therapist communities because that's the community that I train with. Um, there historically has been some dogma around how you do and don't do couples therapy when there's betrayal. Um, there's some dogma around how fast or how slow disclosure should take. And I have seen therapists and their clients hold to the printout, hold to the prescription while chaos reigns. So I would say here, I'm not going to answer whether it's safe to continue marital sessions because I wouldn't be the one who would know. That would be you. If the other two people in that equation, the marital therapy and your spouse, are acting as if everything is okay, this is fine, we can continue, and you're saying, hold on, I've got my foot like pinched under this thing and I'm in screaming pain. Um, I would say it's necessary that a timeout be called. I'm not saying necessarily for marital sessions, but like one of those, hold on, hey, can we all talk about what we're doing here? Because I keep having it come up for me that when there's not transparency or a recovery plan, I'm asking myself, what am I doing here? What does the future hold for me? So I've seen situations where it has been the wiser thing to take time in preparing a disclosure and not push anybody on artificial timelines. And I've seen other times where it's the right thing to create a fire under the person who has the disclosure to give and needs to get the recovery plan. Again, that's there's not a one size fits all. It's really about who the coupleship is, where the pain points actually are. And I would say the goal for couples therapy early on is to get everybody out of acute suffering. That's why I talk about secure functioning in early recovery, because again, to your question here, is it safe? The answer is if not everybody feels safe, then it's not. And visceral safety, you get nothing if there is not visceral safety first. And then what can she do to support him, but also protect herself from unnecessary suffering? Um, it's kind of the last thought that I talked about in the lecture portion here, is protecting your partner from the truth is not always, I would say it's almost never the best thing because no growth happens. So this morning, we did a kitchen remodel last spring. We had to do this remodel because our kitchen, that it wasn't built in 1947 with the rest of the house, but it was darn close because as I pulled down the old cabinets last spring, we found some funky wallpaper underneath it. Our toddlers had started pulling out the drawers, which were already in rough shape, but they pulled out the drawers and they'd use them as ladders to get on top of the
Hmm.
counter. And so after about 3 months of that, all of our drawers are non-functional, like we can't store stuff in the kitchen. So we decided now's the time to do the remodel. So we have sturdy drawers and we have those magnetic locks. I've also watched my toddlers defeat 3 different toddler locks. So these have like a strong magnet key, and you put it on a certain point in the drawer, and it drops the latch and opens the drawer. So most of our cabinets and drawers are latched. There's one with like their plates and forks, little plastic things and cups. And then our silverware drawer and our garbage pull out, we generally don't lock. Well, this morning, as I'm getting breakfast ready, my toddlers run to the silverware drawer and they both get out 2 butter knives and they start having a pirate fight like it's swords. And thankfully it was butter knives, but I do not like the habit of playing with knives. And so I got the knives from them, and I said to them, and I said to my wife and my teenage boys, I said, we need to start locking this drawer, because if that's going to be happening, like that's a dangerous precedent to set. And also, I want to have knives in the drawer to use when I need them. And so the knives are now out of reach, and that's what comes to mind for me when I think about supporting while protecting from unnecessary suffering. Support is not always rah rah go get it. Sometimes support is, hey, I'm putting this behind a lock, or this is not available right now because it's not a good idea to keep this in the public space. When my toddlers get less impulsive, when they get less knife focused, I'll unlock the drawer again. And my 3-year-old's first, Dad, where am I going to get a fork when I need it? Well, you're going to ask mom or dad, and we'll unlock the drawer and you'll get a fork. And she did not like it, but that's the model of support. There's nobody got a timeout. There was no lecture. It's just it's a boundary that makes sense. It's an organic consequence for action. And if we're looking at developing maturity, and when I say like pain is really the ultimate motivator there, allowing there to be reasonable consequences, stand by those. And you often don't have to make them up. It's kind of what comes top of mind for you. Hey, I'm not going to continue doing this. It ends up hurting me. I'm taking this off the table until I'd like you to get into a place where, give me a recovery plan, give me a disclosure, and then I would reconsider doing
Yeah, and like when I hear partners going, I want to be supportive, and I'm, you know, that can be so manipulated by addicts. I'm just gonna, I'm like, so yeah, I need you to be supportive of me, and because I was reading in this, and I was like, he's resistant to this, he's resistant to that, and I'm like, but you want to be supportive, and I'm going like, get support for you. Like,
it.
we have all of these things for partners, and we encourage partners to get support with other partners, addicts to get support for with other addicts. We've already talked about on this webinar, going to 12 step, having mentors, having accountability with other people who are struggling with the same issues we are, because they're the ones that'll call us out on things in a way and show us a different path. And for partners to have a place, to get the support that they need. What Jon said, what is the treatment plan? What is the goal? What is the time frame for the formal therapeutic disclosure? At Seeking Integrity, we really work from a framework of each of you having your individual therapist, maybe some conjoint therapy, or if there's, like we can't even tolerate being in the same house, how do you navigate, kind of a detente, in that moment. How do you, come up with a little plan, but not really starting couples therapy until both of you, I'm talking to the addict, is able to show up, and not be minimizing the pain that the partner's in, not lying, not, all of those things. So usually around formal therapeutic disclosure, but just like Jon said, there's no like, it's not the dogma. It's not like, well, at 90 days, this and that, like, no, everybody's on their own journey, and everybody's, I always look at, you guys are in a gap, and how do you close that gap? And it's not going to be this nice little linear, we're both moving in the same direction at the same pace. No, but, for partners, we so encourage you to have the healthy boundaries for you. So Debbie McCrae, who's like the queen of boundaries, I always say she can do a 4-part talking boundary off the tip of her tongue, where I have to go, each part, but she's really good at it. And she's going to be teaching a boundary course for partners starting late February, a 6-week online work group. And that will help you, because your internal boundaries and external boundaries will, there will be commonality with other people. Like domestic violence is, like that's a hard no for everybody, but other things are going to, going to be different. So making sure that they align with you and what you need for your boundaries and consequences. Is consequences, not punishment, not control. This is, I'm just taking care of myself. Like Jon was talking about, kind of like, like I'm going to kind of step away until these things happen. And then like, that's a healthy boundary, and that's taking care of you. So check that out. Hopefully it'll be going up, I don't know about yet this week, but by the end of next week, I'll check into that. But, check those things out. Next question. I'm the betrayed partner. My essay constantly tries to protect me from the truth, which infuriates me. Any suggestions on what a boundary would look like for this?
Um, I think a boundary for this, trying to think of how to say this, a way to effectively deploy a boundary for this is, um, it's important, I think, to point to what your essay spouse stands to lose if they don't treat you fairly, and not just like, hey, I'm gone. But again, the social learning thing. Um, so that which gets tolerated, that which passes without consequence, will be reproduced. So when we're doing this protect me from the truth thing, we don't have fairness, we don't have shared power, because somebody knows more than the other person. And that is different from like when couples are preparing for disclosure and the betrayed spouse says, I don't want to know every nitty gritty detail. I don't want to know names of partners you were with. I don't want to know locations. I don't want to know times of year. I need to know quantity and general behavior. For the partner then to say, I'm not going to tell you that, that is not the kind of protecting from the truth we're talking about. That's actually collaborative. And the person who said, I don't want to know, is saying, I know it's out there. Please don't tell me. And then the other person plays a collaborative role in, I will protect you from that. You will not come across what you don't want to know. So that's where I would start. The boundary is highlighting what fairness is, what equality and what shared power is. Because if we're going to start a precedent where one of us gets to decide without the other one's inclusion what is known and what is not known, um, I would even ask my partner, how would you feel if I kept information from you that you felt like you needed to know, even if it was upsetting to you? Even if you had a hard time with it, you still wanted to know. How would you feel if I just said, "Nah, I'm not going to tell you"? So I would appeal to that fairness. Fairness tends to be a baseline. It's one of the first social concepts that I think kids really understand viscerally. I would appeal to that fairness and that equality first. And then I would be thinking, if this is something that's happening chronically, I would be thinking about, again, in that, what's actually working here. If I've told you several times and you're still doing it, if I have threatened to leave and you're still doing it, if I have continued XYZ and you're still doing it, I would go back to the drawing board for yourself and evaluate, how have I already approached this? And if it's continuing to happen, all those things that I've already done to approach it are on the won't try it again list. I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to have to get creative in what my boundaries are. I'm going to have to get creative in what my response is, because whatever I've been doing thus far is not grabbing attention. It's not putting the potential loss, the potential pain front and center. And for a lot of us with our boundaries like this, my wife and I say to each other all the time, hey, when you're disciplining the kids, please remember that a punishment for them is a punishment for us. So don't punish me too harshly when you're setting something up for the kids. Sometimes we avoid certain boundaries or certain consequences because it sucks for us too. And I can think of times in my own relationship where really effective change came out of both of us feeling the loss, both of us feeling the like, oh crap, this really, really sucks. Can't continue this. So the boundary again would start with, hey, I'm interested in a fair power sharing relationship. How would you feel if I did the same? What I'm asking for is give me the truth. And what I will try to do is not send you to the seventh circle of hell. I will try not to punish you for telling me. I may be angry with what you are telling me, but I will try to make it easy for you to tell me. Because that's another part of the boundary. If we want transparency, we can't punish each other for it. Again, in the social learning model, that would tend to be an extinguishing behavior. So sometimes to get what we want, we have to work on how we're receiving what we want. So the boundaries come from a lot of different directions. I'm thinking about this.
I was thinking elementary age child, and she lied to us about a behavior, and we found out, and so, and we were really clear to her, you would have gotten into a little trouble for what you did. You're getting into more trouble for the lying, that, and she didn't do it again. That was, and I know we're dealing with an addict, and all bets are off. But I think at some point, I love the idea of how would you feel about that, but for you to find in the boundary of like, I hear that's the story you're telling yourself, that you're doing it to protect me, and being curious about what is the gain for you, like not telling me and me finding out and being really angry. How is that building trust, when my vulnerability is you lied to me, you had this whole secret life, so I'm left going like nothing has really changed. So how can I build trust in you if you're going to continue those things? And like John was talking about earlier, I often say that no addict changes until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. And this is a routine, and he may have learned it. Like, we have lots of guys that come to our residential treatment program, that was how they stayed alive, so to speak, in the family dynamics. That was for lots of different reasons. So there's a gain for him in that moment. And even what John was talking about earlier, we will do things for the immediate relief, even though there's a really long term, negative outcome for it. So I had one partner that shared, I think it was like, is that really the story you want to stick with? Something like that. And it wasn't confrontational, but it was just kind of like, I'm going to give you a pause to rethink that.
I love that for a boundary too, because as unsatisfying as this might sound, we can only play with the cards we have. So another look at a boundary here is if you have a partner that struggles with that, you may say, hey, listen, I'm going to assume that you're not giving me the full story, and I'm going to be direct with you. So I love that as a boundary. Hey, is that the story that you'd like to stick with? It's a graceful way to open up for further exploration. It's a graceful way to say, hey, if there's a second run at you're going to be doing, let's just do it now. So I love that. Again, as dissatisfying as it might sound in the short term, if I know you tend to keep things from me in a really inviting way, I'm going to be saying, and what else? Now let's talk about what you don't want to tell me. And especially if you set that up ahead of time, it can be very collaborative. It can be very warm. It can actually be really appreciated.
Yeah, and I think a place of growth, for both of you, because like, I know if I'm infuriated, I'm going to have an energy coming off me. It's going to be emanating from me. Maybe it's not even big and scary, but there's, and I always say, if you look at your addict as, a 7 or 8 year old, that's about, emotionally where they are. There's some vulnerabilities, and I'm not giving them a pass. But if you go, okay, how can we address this in a way that even somebody immature emotionally, could possibly take it in, there's a chance. And if whatever you try doesn't work, John was talking about earlier with that couple, it's like they're doing the same thing. And he said, look at everything you've tried. Those things didn't work, or that one kind of worked, but is there a way to adjust it? Great. I find, if we can come at it of like, we've got this issue, and, and can we, and now we're going to be adults, problem solve on it. Can we know this is going to happen? Can we come up with a plan? When this happens, we're going to try it this way. Can we agree to that? Okay. And then when it happens, somebody needs to be aware that this is happening again, and we're going to try this. And then you get to do the analysis. Did that help? Okay, mostly, 60%. Okay, what else could we do? Again, now I'm back in my thinking part of my brain, rather than the I'm infuriated and I'm fearful. And, those patterns are just, exhausting and don't get you anywhere.
Yeah. That's it.
Other questions? We have a few more minutes. We'd love more questions.
Feel free to get one or two more in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I assume there will be another component to this series because you're finding all of these great things to pull from.
Yeah.
I'm
I
loving
mean,
this.
there's almost endless models to look at, and I'm having fun doing it. So I'm planning on
Good.
I'll come back with another model in a couple weeks.
Great. And we have another question. So, dealing with chronic intimacy deprivation in a marriage, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, and physical. SA, mother enmeshment, husband constantly harping on no sex, but extremely unwilling to allow for any real intimacy in the marriage in all four areas, very avoidant and acting out due to lack of sex. He constantly projects anger and wonders why I don't feel safe for anything. What do you think about intimacy anorexia?
As a concept, I think it's a solid concept. Carnes talks about that as the other side of the coin with addiction. Both have to do with a high amount of control over sex, intimacy, access, all of that. From a high level view, as a relationship therapist for a couple, this is not a fair relationship, and the marker for is it fair is anyone in the relationship saying, hey, this doesn't feel fair. If anyone is saying that, it's not fair. It's not fair. So I hope, and maybe this part of the answer, maybe you ask your partner to watch this. I hope your partner can listen to that. Sure, there's things you do and don't want to do. Yeah, you get to be your own person. However, you can't expect your partner to stay happily by your side if they feel so much injustice. To put it in Stan's terms, if you don't have shared power, if there's a dictatorship, dictators end up getting hung, is what Stan says. So the system can only carry so much unfairness before all goodwill erodes, and then you're at full out war with each other. So you allow this stuff to continue unmitigated at your own peril. And that goes out for everybody here. If you are struggling with a problem in a relationship and you're thinking, gosh, where do we even get started? Start with that. Start with that question of, does this feel fair? And work from there.
And I mentioned the boundaries course. I hope we get it posted quickly, but like to me, this is, like how exhausting and dysregulating for you to feel like, he's constantly harping on, and projects anger and all of those things. So what are you doing? I say this to partners all the time. What are you doing to take care of you? Like being around that would be very dysregulating for me. So I would need to go, partner, when this happens, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to go for a walk or go call a friend or go whatever. I'm going to remove myself from this environment. I'll check back in with you. I'm not abandoning, but I'm going to check back in with you in an hour, and see where you are. And if that person has still projecting all that anger, I'm gonna keep taking care of me, because this other person is not going to be able to take care of me. They're not taking care of themselves yet, and I'm the only one that really can, take care of my take care of myself and hold those boundaries for myself. So, I mentioned internal boundaries. We don't talk about that a lot. It's always boundaries, about other things, but internal boundaries are I'm not going to betray me, in this relationship. I'm going to take care of me. So please check into those. I'm going to push to get that posted soon. Okay. The next question: what is the timeline for addicts in recovery? Is it first himself and then the relationship? I've been watching and watching his behaviors for the past year, and he's only doing the minimum.
I would say timelines depend on what you've already signed up for. So if you are a single person, take all the time you want. You are the only person that your recovery really impacts. If you are a married person, you can't change overnight. However, you have somebody depending on you becoming more stable. So um, again, like I said on the last one, unfairness can only stand for so long before goodwill erodes. So you might have to, whether you feel ready for it or not, you might have to figure out how to work quicker. If you've got children, even faster. The more things you've signed up for that are depending on you, the less you can drag your feet in recovery, I would say. Um, so I think that's part of the hard reality for a lot of addicts and even a lot of spouses. I find look at it this way. Well, once we get the addiction problem solved, once we get the sobriety problem solved, everything will be better. Now, recovering from addiction doesn't teach you how to do relationships. They're two separate things. Active addiction is a barrier to being able to do effective relationships. Um, so in my view of recovery, there's always this like extreme commitment and presence with the step that you're on, and an awareness of where would I be heading next? What do I need to be working on next? And again, a displeased spouse is not always a sign that you've married a grump. Sometimes well, I'd say a lot of times it's a sign you're not a great partner for that person. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's not set in stone. You can do something about that. But you do have to, the more that depends on you in your life, the more urgency, the more of a fire there has to be under you for your recovery. And growth doesn't happen in the absence of struggle. Growth only happens when there is struggle and tension. So if you're in recovery and you're feeling struggle, tension, gosh, there's a lot of pressure. Don't turn off your sensitivity towards that, and don't stop. Push because you're developing muscle. Push because there needs to be change. And there is no growth without resistance. There is no growth without struggle.
And I was thinking, so I posted, there's a betrayed partner work group. This is different than the boundaries one. It'll start March 4th again. So check that out. I'm wondering what your healthy boundaries are for this, because, I mentioned earlier, no addict changes until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. He can be I'm not exaggerating. He can do this for decades, and you
Yes.
waiting and waiting. And
Yep.
and so like Jon said, the goodwill can erode, and but at what cost to you too? So what are you doing for your healthy boundaries to take care of you so that you're not dysregulated waiting for him? And I think clearly stating boundaries is like, I'd like to move closer to you. I would love that. And you are not providing the space to do that. And it may be like you're looking for specific actions to take place, and unless that's happening, then again, I'm taking care of me. We have lots of resources on that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, even better than specific actions, I need to feel a certain way in our relationship in relating to you. I think the most bedrock, no messing around boundary is, hey, I would like you to work on how you show up as a partner. Here are my concerns. You have 6 months. I will give you 6 months to work on that. I need to see improvement, or I am going to be considering leaving this relationship. I am going to be going elsewhere. I deserve happiness with the person that I'm with. Um, so again, you can see there's not extreme antagonism in that. The support is, I'm letting you know I'm running to the end of my rope, and I would hate to get there and spring this on you. So I'm telling you now, work on it. I want to see some changes. Otherwise, I need to go elsewhere. I need to take care of myself.
And we can help you with those boundaries and things. So check out the courses. We're going to get cut off. We finished just on time. Thank you, John. We'll look forward to
Thank you.
seeing the next installment too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.